Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We've got all of you muted right now. Brad and I call this the Dale Dennis way of making sure everyone can have a conversation and not disturb everyone else. So at the end, we'll unmute you or allow you to unmute yourself so that if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them for you. I'm Randy Watson, Commissioner, and Brad Nunswander, Deputy Commissioner. And if you can hear us, just wave to us. Wave. All right. Thanks, Mark. We saw you. So
I thought there was a concern. Traction already got up and left. He's back.
So we appreciate you spending some time. We're going to be talking about Gemini 2, the next round of redesigned schools that we will be involved with. And with that, I'm going to share my screen with you and go through a PowerPoint presentation that's pretty short. And then from there, hang on.
You hit this share screen.
So you should be seeing my screen now. And if that isn't working, I'm sure you'll let us know. As we go through this, again, kind of jot down your questions. We'll be happy to answer those at the end. And this is being recorded, so if you want to play it back at your admin meetings or with other people, feel free to do so, as we want everyone to have the information that's necessary to make good decisions about whether or not they want to be involved with redesign.
Also, if you have questions as we go through, you can do the chat, and we'll try to monitor that as we're going through it.
So as you know, we have a 10-member State Board of Ed that have given us the charge to have a new vision for education in Kansas. And we take that seriously, and we're excited about that. As you know, the new vision is pretty simple. 2 parts: lead the world. The metrics in doing that is we need to get to 95% high school graduation and 70 to 75% post-secondary effective rate, and many things leading up to that so that we can help each child be successful in school. We don't believe, and the state board doesn't believe, that we can move the entire system of Kansas in the existing system we have and get to those metrics, that it will require us to make a change. And what is difficult about this is we've only had 2 major models of education in the history of Kansas: the one-room schoolhouse model, which is gone from Kansas, and the model that we currently teach in, which is age-based, academic-based, and time-based. So as an example, we can walk into almost every high school, Brad, today, and we can see freshmen, that's an age, who are in English class, taking the same English class at a defined period of time. And the most common time period in Kansas is between 50 and 55-minute blocks in a 7-period day. So
at the same time, just about every elementary you go in, and there's 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd. It's what we've had for decades.
So we're looking to change that to help each student become successful in his or her path. So today we are officially announcing the next phase in redesign. We're calling it Gemini 2. The spacewalk begins, and we're taking the best of what we've learned from the Mercury and Gemini 1, and we are learning from them, and we're going to be sharing with you the application process, and then answering any questions that you may have. So if you decide to apply, you are agreeing to redesign 1 elementary and 1 secondary school. The secondary school can be a middle school or high school. It could be your entire district, but you're agreeing to redesign at least 1 elementary and 1 secondary school.
And on the application, you'll see that just yesterday we went in, and you will see on there that it says at least 1 elementary and 1 secondary, based on some input we received yesterday. Because if you want to do elementary, middle, and high school, great.
And we know some of you, that isn't your entire district. And so that obviously would be your entire district. Our goal is to change Kansas education to help each student be successful over a 10-year cycle, and we're in year 3 currently. You will have to, if you want to embark with us, you're going to have district and school support. District support in that your school board will need to take a public vote in order to enter redesign. That vote does not have to be unanimous. It simply has to be a 4-3 vote or a majority vote of your school board. You need to have 80% approval of your faculty within the buildings that you want to redesign. And you have to have a letter of support from your local teacher association, professional organization. For most of you, that is KNEA. And you have to be able, meaning that you have the resources that you'll dedicate to it and willing to completely redesign one elementary, one secondary at a minimum around the vision we shared, the outcomes of the state board, our definition of successful high school graduate. So it's pretty wide open, but there are some guardrails or parameters within this work. And our process from this point on will be, you will get the 18-19 year to design your model, and you will launch that model in the fall of 2019. So today's the webinar. The window for application starts February 5th, 2018. And it ends on April 2nd, 2018. So we think that's a much better window than we gave you in Mercury, which was over the summer, because we didn't learn about the finances until late. And we will announce then the next round, called Gemini 2, at the state board meeting on April 17, 2018. Now, we are not limiting the number of schools we're going to take in this cycle. So as you know, in the first cycle, we said we were going to choose 7 Mercury schools, and then we had a different model because we had 29 school districts apply for the Gemini 1. We've learned some things since then, and so we have a little bit different model going forward, but we hope to be able to take everyone that has a good application process, and that the committee that we have that vet the applications feel that we can take. So we're in the process of designing a Kansas redesigned flight manual. This will serve to help guide the Gemini school process in the redesign. But I want to make this clear. You do not have to be a part of the KSDE redesign efforts. There's nothing that require you to do so. If you want to take our flight manual and you want to listen in to the webinars that we do, and you want to use the resources that we post on Google Forms and our website and our Padlet, you are welcome to do that, and you are welcome to do this on your own. Here's what we found out. It's hard to do on your own at the speed of which we're doing it. And that's why we found that the Mercury schools, with us being in those school districts approximately every 2 weeks, allowed them to work at a pace that was not the normal pace of how we think about school improvement or school change.
I might also want to add to this, those Gemini 1 districts that are in the process of planning right now, if they do not launch next fall, next August, they will also be a part of next year's support as well. So this will be all Gemini schools 1 and 2, because we'll want to continue to bring along in a more meaningful way the current Gemini districts, which we're referring to as Gemini 1.
So again, if you're planning to launch in the fall of 18 Gemini 1 schools, then you'll launch. If not, you'll join Gemini 2. And here's how this is going to be different. In Mercury, we went to those 7 school districts every 2 weeks. So we were in Jay and Tammy were in Stockton, and then they might be in Liberal the next day, they may be in Twin Valley the next day, and then Olathe, Coffeyville, Wellington, McPherson. Well, that was a very effective way of bringing to scale change. It was a very inefficient way of us spending our time because of the amount of time that we were on the road. So what we're going to do with Gemini 2 is that we are going to regionalize that support. That does not mean you will not get for your team individual support. You will. But instead of us going to 28, 29 school districts, which would take us one per month in that cycle, what we will do is look at who applies, where they're located, and we will regionalize that support. So let's take, for example, that Salina, southeast of Saline, and Solomon decided they wanted to be a Gemini 2 school. We may decide, let's meet in Salina, or let's meet in Solomon or southeast of Saline, and you would take your teams and you would come to that regional site. At that regional site, while the other teams will be there in a large facility, we will be giving your team individualized work to do and answering questions. You'll have someone leading you through that design process. So in that example I'm giving you, Salina's team, and you'd have two teams, an elementary and a secondary at minimum, you would be having your own facilitator going through the process. Justin, you at Solomon, your team would have someone else leading you through a very similar process, but it would be separate. And so that will maximize our time and yours, and that way we can bring on board more schools starting in the fall of 2018. So that is the process by which we're going to go through. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, come back to the video, and I'm going to allow all of you, we're going to look at the chat here, and Brad's going to read some of the chat, and
so here's a question. So for Newton, if you already have part of redesign, you do not have to go through this application process again. Newton is already a Gemini 1 district, so you will just participate in these regional trainings. So no, you do not have to reapply because you're already a Gemini district.
right.
But we do want you to participate because we believe the regional support models are going to be much better than what we've been able to provide this year with you just joining in every 2 weeks by Skype. There's a question on who will provide that support. We're designing it right now, but it will be a combination of individual, with Jay and Tammy, along with other agency staff, along with, we're partnering with service centers, USA, KNEA, KASB, MTSS. So we'll have teams there that have had training around leading you through a process. And I kind of want to, these are not events where you're going to come to and you will be spoken to. These are, you're not going to, it's not a sit and get. You're going to bring your teams, and there will be people there to coach your teams, your redesign teams, through a process. So you will actually show up and be working. The individuals that will be there will just be providing mentoring and coaching you through that process. You're scrolling through those pretty fast there, Randy.
I'm going back up.
Oh, okay.
How would this play with KISA?
The thing that the Mercury 7 are doing, they are following the same process that KSDE is. You do a needs assessment. You ask yourself the why. What is our data telling us? What do we want to accomplish? What goals do we want to set? They are doing the exact same process as KSDE all around the board's vision and outcomes. They're looking at kindergarten readiness, social emotional, character development, individual plans of study. It's all the same framework. They're just having intense support from Jay and Tammy, number one. And number two, they're looking at redesigning their system around that framework. And they're doing it very aggressively. So they're actually going through the first 3 phases of KSDE all in 1 year to launch next year. But it's the same process.
Sheila, and then I'm going to have Brad jump back to JK's question. Yes, you'll want those 3 schools to get the vote of the staff. You just don't have to go back to your board or KNEA. Just get the vote of that staff if they want to do it, and then you're good to go on that. And JK wants to know, is there a rubric to guide the application process, Brad? And where would they find that?
We will be posting the application. It's very, I don't want to say self-explanatory. You're going to assure to us that you met the requirements of your board approval, your teacher approval. You will attach a letter of support. And then there's a couple questions on there, narrative questions that we'd like to know. What is your district already doing relative to the board outcome? It's just going to tell us a little bit about what you already have in place. I will say also that we met yesterday with all the service centers and walked through between now and the application deadline. They are prepared to have conversations, deeper conversations, where if a bunch of schools want to come together and just talk about this. Things that, well, how do we know if we're ready? They have talking points, you know, examples of, well, how familiar is your community and your staff already with the board vision, the Kansans Can vision? Where are you at in the process? What type of leadership is it going to take in order for a principal and building level teacher leaders? Do we believe we have a culture to have that in place? So they're ready to start having those dialogues and conversations with you. Maybe bring a group of schools just to have those discussions about whether or not this would be a good application for you.
So I think this is Monty and Smoky Valley. It's an interesting tagline, but I think we saw Monty with that. Can you share more insight into what it means to be completely redesign a building? Monty, I'm going to take a shot at that, and Brad will join in. So it means that we are totally restructuring the learning process, the management of the learning process. It will be some of the non-negotiables that Kansas said they wanted. Social emotional components will be heavily embedded. It will be a personalized journey for every student. It will be heavily relied on project-based learning.
A deep commitment and involvement with parents and community, much more than what we currently do in our traditional system. And you'll see that for a lot of them, you know, Kansas said, you know, teachers need to spend more time with kids, whether it's more time during the day, whether it's more time across the year. So those are kind of some of the components of a redesigned system that we're seeing when we go tour other schools in other states that have done this, as well as what we're seeing the Mercury 7. I think when you get this support from these regional networks next year, we're not going to come out and tell you what to do. We're going to come out and help facilitate the conversations and the process for you to figure out what you want to do.
And that will be, and what's different, I think we found in the Mercury and Gemini, is the pace at which that change will happen in your building. It's a lot of change, and it happens fairly quickly. I mean, they're in the pilot phase right now, and they're going to launch. Mercury will launch in the fall. And I think all of them would say they probably couldn't do that without the support that they receive, because we'll push you to make some of those decisions in your community and going forward. The other thing, I think, what does it mean to be completely redesigned is an appreciation and a discussion about physical activity and arts and music and all of those things that make up a well-rounded person. I know we've got, for example, Olathe, I know, has expanded physical activity in their schools, and some others have expanded music and art offerings for students. So that'll be obviously part of your decision, but we'll be helping you look at research of what helps every student be successful, and then you'll start to design from there. We will also be taking you to see school districts pretty quick in this design process, not to show you what the model should look like. We were fearful of that in this phase, but what we found is when people could see a redesigned school, they went, oh, I get it. And we were worried that they would see it and go, well, it has to be that way. So I think we'll do that earlier in this process and later. Jamie, you know, what information do teachers need to know to decide whether or not they support joining the effort? One, it's really hard. I mean, this is work, and they'll tell you, I think it's meaningful work. I think you should call or email some of the Mercury schools. You know, Liberal is the closest in your area, and ask them, would they do it again, you know, as they go through it. I think you would want to take a look at some of what they've done in redesign. But and I think the other thing that teachers will know is they, alongside administrators, are going to design this. This is not just what the administrators are going to do. This is what needs to happen. So Jamie, the district calendars need to be designed. Maybe you certainly are going to have to get substitute teachers for your team members. And I think that's Galen's question of what does a redesigned team look like? It's generally 5 to 10 people, depending on the size of your building. It's teachers and your lead teachers, principal, possibly someone from central office. But we will probably ask that a teacher be the pilot or the command person and the assistant command person of this process, because everyone's going to be equal going into it.
Yeah, if you talk to the Mercury, some of the Mercury 7, they've been very creative. They've got one teacher that's the pilot, and other teachers the co-pilot. They really kind of got into Randy's language. But you'll be able to, by next year, as Mercury 7 are launching, you're going to get a kind of a sense of what some of these models look like. But there has to be a culture in your buildings that allows for co-leadership, where you have a principal that is willing to be more of an instructional leader than a manager. And I'm just being honest, they've got to be able to allow teachers to co-lead, because it has to be designed to be sustainable. It has to be built by your teams. And someone mentioned earlier kind of the similarities between redesign and KSDE. I remember, you know, last year doing 0-year trainings, people saying, well, why do I need a building leadership team that's made up of predominantly teachers with these? The Mercury 7 will tell you, if you don't have that, you're not going to succeed without sustainability. It is the very same process and structure as KSDE. They are just being very aggressive. but every place we've gone, the teachers have said it was hard work. 6, 7 months, it was hard, but I would never go back. This is exactly why we got into this profession, and we would never go back.
I think this is right. Brad will correct me. We were talking to a large school district in Texas, Pasadena. I think they had 36 schools, so it's a fairly large school district. And they talked about how hard it was early on, and that their teachers just wouldn't go back. They're so excited about what it is now, but the initial work is really hard. But now they're finding that they feel it's more enjoyable to come to work, and they're pretty excited about it. So there's a question about opportunities for professional development this summer. Yes, the answer is yes. We will provide you just some readings for the summer, some activities to kind of get prepared even this spring, things that you can do. And USA, so United School Administrators, I believe, is bringing in the Buck Institute to do project-based learning training. That's one of what we call our partners, because Buck is somewhat the gold standard of project-based training. And if you want to send your people to USA, you can get a jump start on that training, which we think would be beneficial for you. Otherwise, you'll be going through it at some point with us.
And if you have not yet registered for the Kansans Can Symposium in Manhattan,
yes,
there will be a lot of sessions on redesign, including the Mercury 7 districts will be there sharing what they're going through in this process. And again, we have a team that is, by now and next August, will be putting together a Kansas redesign flight manual that will walk you through the process that Mercury 7's going through, and it will be used in those regional supports. Again, it's important that the process is followed, but what your teams design will be unique to your buildings and your community.
I will tell you, just in looking at the Mercury designs right now, and of course they have yet to launch, but in looking at what they're planning to do and what they're experimenting and doing, as Brad said, they're all a little different, but they all personalize the experience. They all have deep projects embedded in their community. They all have tight collaboration with their parents and their teams that have designed. Excitement's pretty high, and well, very high in all those districts right now, and it's fun to see. So there will be some opportunities even this spring. We hope that all of you come to the Kansas Symposium, because that's really going to start to become somewhat of our redesign process in the spring, where you can learn directly from the school districts that are doing it. You can talk to the principals, the superintendents, the teachers, and they can tell you firsthand, how difficult this is, how exciting this is, everything in between.
And one thing, back to maybe something that Rumford asked earlier, is, visiting with your teachers. Every place that we go, whether it's Epic or in Liberty, Missouri, or Wilder, Idaho, or Evanston, Wyoming, or Tulsa, the teachers will tell you that at the core of redesign is strong instructional practices, and they start everything around the standards. And they just look at that and they build on that every project, every engagement, every experience. Because when you look at the definition of a successful high school graduate, the first bullet is academically ready, cognitively ready. And they start with that. It's just changing the system in order to personalize it and build around that. So it's it is true teaching.
From Yoshe, is there funding attached to this? No, we purposely did not go into this with any additional money other than what the legislature may appropriate this year for school finance for all school districts, because we wanted to be able to do this without changing staff, without changing principals, without changing school board members, and without getting grant money that then would go away, and then you'd have to wonder how to do it. So it will be done within the existing resources you have, and that's what the Mercury and Gemini 1 schools have been doing this year.
And that's a great, you know, we've intentionally chosen places to go that have been successful around redesign that are public schools. We didn't want to go to a charter. We didn't want to go to nothing wrong with charter. We didn't want to go to a place that had to have money to start, that was able to hire a unique staff, decide what students they were going to get. Our initiative is to redesign public education. And the only way we can large scale it is that we do it. And we believe we can, because we've seen a lot of places that have. They did it with their existing staff and communities and resources.
The other thing I might say as we look at the redesign, and I know all of you, like Brad and I still do at times, this is hard to reimagine when you're talking about a system that has yet to be put in place. But try to imagine that your textbook adoption cycle, no. Your curriculum adoption cycle, no. You know, classes that flow in distinct blocks that are uniform for every kid every hour, no. When you start to personalize the process, the schedule changes dramatically, the resources change dramatically, and we think our staff will and other Kansas teachers will help us a great deal over the next several years. So we're in the early stages of this, and it looks really exciting and promising. There's some of these concepts that aren't new. You know, many of us will remember thematic instruction, the elementary level, back in the 80s and 90s, and somewhat return to that, only more project-based and immersion in the communities.
The only thing I'll add, yeah, there's no additional funding, but what there is intense support that you would not have otherwise.
And I might say this, because there are companies that you can hire to do this, and they're really good. We've learned a lot from those companies. They've helped us a lot free of charge. And they will come in to Augusta, Kansas, for example, and I'm not making up the number, for around $300,000 a year, they'll be happy to work with you. So I think there is that. We're giving a lot of time and effort to make sure you're successful. That's what'll happen. So 495, how much collaboration may occur between Mercury and Gemini? 2, quite a bit, I think. Especially you're going to get to see those schools earlier than the general public, because you're going to want to see what they're doing. You're going to want to pick their brain.
Yes. So when we bring together, we envision, and again, we're in the design of the regional support model, but we envision that once a month, you will come to a location regionally appropriate to you. And then every 2 weeks, so every 2 weeks, you're either going to be coming in or we'll be reaching out. Now, your redesign teams will have work to do every week. That's kind of the 80-20 model. They're going to have to be committed to 20% of their week. Those teams need to spend on this. It's not something you can put aside. It is hard work. So it's but that will involve, because the Gemini 1s and the Mercury 7s are also your neighbors, and we want to tap into them as well.
Tammy corrects me, as she and Jay, they have to do this a lot. So evidently the USA slots for project-based learning from Buck have all been spoken for by the Mercury districts and their staff. So they were limited, I think, to 70 to 80 people, and it looks like those are taken up. So we'll certainly give you some reading material and maybe some other options that you can attend. But we would say for sure, if you're looking for additional training before, come to the symposium in March in Manhattan, and you're going to learn a lot at that place, at that conference from the Mercury and Gemini schools. You can type your chat questions. We're going to leave it muted just because that helps any of you that are having a conference call or something on the side, and we get a lot of feedback. So please don't hesitate to go to the chat function and just type your message, and we'd be happy to try to answer it. We've got a few minutes left here before we sign off. We want to make sure that we've answered all your questions.
While we're waiting for questions, I see Shell Kemper on here. There are so many supports that are existing in Kansas, including TASN, that I'm not sure everybody is fully aware of. It's just doing a better job of providing support. So TASN's on board, MTSS, they've been heavily engaged with us on this. They've attended some of our visits to other school districts. When you talk about personalized learning, you don't get much better. What you see is tiered supports for every kid.
So, April, you're supposed to ask us easy questions. We appreciate the tough ones. April is asking why can't it be 2 elementary or 2 secondary? What we want to do is change all 286 school districts. We want all of you to change. So what we are looking for is some flow between an elementary and secondary school. And that's why we want 1 elementary and 1 secondary. Again, that's the minimum. You may want to throw in, Coffeyville, for example, as their middle school, right involved with it. I think McPherson has their other schools on maybe a Gemini 1 second cycle. Stockton, of course, that's the entire school district. But that's why we want 1 elementary and 1 secondary to see that progression going forward. What does social emotional component look like within the classroom? Not necessarily a specific program, but certainly, it's attuned to those ACEs, those trauma-informed components. It's measurement. So it could be a program. Some people have that. It could be simply putting something together. We have Amy and Patty's work out of KU that certainly we like a lot and would help you in that design. But it will look different in your building. It's just we need, that's going to be a focus going forward.
Okay.
So one of the questions we had was if you've got some odd arrangements, like let's say you grade cluster across districts, so you have 1 K3 building, then an intermediate building, etc. Do all those buildings need to commit? No. We would work with you. I know that happened in Newton. That was one of the questions. I think they have a 5th, 6th attendance center, or 7th, 8th attendance center. So if you're broken up differently, what we'd say is bring us 1 elementary, what you would call elementary, bring us 1 secondary. We're going to let you define that. If you're K8 building, of course, that may be entirely inclusive. And again, you may want to commit all those, but you may not. That would be up to you.
I would encourage you over the next month or two to have conversations. Again, we knew that there would be a lot of questions. So we met yesterday with all the service centers because we know that a lot of you gather there, that get together and have these conversations and really talk about it. Our most important thing is we want to ensure success.
Your success, not ours.
Your success.
We don't want your parents to be unhappy, your school board to be unhappy, students to be unhappy. Our goal is to help you have a successful launch in your model. Anything else? We'll wait just a couple minutes before we sign off. We are here after this webinar to answer your questions. You can email Brad or myself, Tammy or Jay. You can call us. You can stop us on the streets. We want to answer your questions that you have specifically about your schools, because everyone may have a little bit different situation. So we want to thank you. Oh, here's a question. Is there a potential issue with teacher certifications if curricular is becoming cross-curricular? Possibly in the future, but I can tell you we can work around that right now about who the teacher of record is. We have, some redesign things where we're discussing, schools are discussing giving geometry credit and building a house. We can work around that. And so we don't think teacher certification will get in the way, even though we're doing some things cross-curricular.
We'll have people say, well, what about if we, do we get waived from anything? And the answer is no. We can't large scale this but what we do have is a policy committee in place that is very closely monitoring this process. And when we see things that are a barrier to redesign, then we have a group that can fix it for the state, not just one district that wants waived from something. So we are closely monitoring that. We have yet, of course it's early, but we have yet to come across something that prevents someone to redesign their system. But we do have a group sitting there monitoring the process. They meet once a month.
Well, it's after Gemini 2. We probably in the future will scale an Apollo phase. We want to see how many are in the Gemini 2 phase. If we have 10, we'll certainly scale an Apollo. If we have 150, we may have to take a break and take a deep breath because we'll have a lot going on. So probably depends on how many, but we anticipate another phase at some point.
And my goal would be to eventually to the point where we don't need to keep having a Gemini 3, a Gemini 4. This just starts to become the culture of what happens in Kansas. But again, we are committed as an agency. We hired 2 people to help lead this. At the same time, we are building up capacity with individuals within it doesn't matter what team you're on, whether you're in licensure, career standards, title, early childhood. We are large scaling support with people in this agency to be able to come out and provide regional support around redesign. So we've got to change how we operate too. And I know the service centers yesterday, a couple of them even said they're having to look at how they're going to have to redesign also in order to be able to provide you supports.
Take that one.
Would a K-8 building meet the requirement of elementary and secondary? I would put it in your application. Oh no, we'd have to look at that.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, because I know one district that they're K-8, but their kids go to a neighboring district for high school. Just, put in your application, because I think we want to work with you, but we would like to have a system look at it at your district. That could be your district.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your time. I know how busy you are, and we appreciate your time. Again, this will be recorded, and we'll get it up on our website here as soon as we can. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we hope to see many of you at the symposium in March. So thank you, and we'll be leaving.